Hey, wealth builders, Simon Dixon here, and welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Hard Talk Interviews. Today, I'm really excited. I have a very special guest who is going to be our next Bitcoin president for our next Bitcoin country if we have our evil way with Bitcoin. Well, it's not so evil. We're actually trying to spread peace around the world using Bitcoin and actually use resources for good rather than using them in order to push all these oppressive regimes and wars that we're experiencing around the world outside Bitcoin. And so I'm very happy to introduce to you today Maya Parbhoe. Maya Parbhoe, where are you coming in from? What's our next Bitcoin country, Maya?
Hi. Thanks for having me here, Simon. So I'm calling in from Suriname, so live from the next Bitcoin country.
Awesome. So before we go into your country and what Bitcoin can do for it and what we as the Bitcoin community can do in order to get more countries that adopt Bitcoin, why don't you give us a little bit of a background? So we had a call earlier this week and I was ultra excited by everything you were telling me. But give us a little bit of background and help us understand how you got into Bitcoin and your Bitcoin journey.
Well, I heard about Bitcoin in 2012 from one of my best friends, and then read the white paper, fell completely in love with it. I still had a little bit of a worry that government could still kill it, or it could still be prevented from growing and reaching its full potential. And then once I saw Wikileaks accepting it for donations when their accounts were frozen, that's when I realized like this is unstoppable. And I just wanted to go in full time and increase adoption. I saw the opportunity here, especially in my country, for my country, but also for Bitcoin adoption in general. And I just went all in since then.
Yeah, let me ask a bit more about that. So, why whenever you speak to any different Bitcoiner, there's always something that got them in, something slightly different that was important to them. And that's why I love Bitcoin, because it just brings out these important issues for people. Now, for you, it was WikiLeaks. What was it about WikiLeaks that was important to you? And is this something you were regularly like using as a source of information to combat like the traditional media propaganda, and or was it just the fact that it was trying to be taken down, the financial blockade, or all of it? But what intrigued you about Bitcoin and WikiLeaks?
Well, actually, it touches something. That's an interesting question. It touches something personally for me, actually. So WikiLeaks, Edward Snowden, revealing corruption, and the corruption touched me personally in my life. My father was murdered because of corruption. It's a part of the disease in this country that limits development. So I've experienced it firsthand. And then WikiLeaks, kind of seemed like this platform that I wish we'd had here, and where just things would have been would be or get more exposure, for example, globally, in terms of corruption, because it's pretty much under the radar. It stays, it gets publicity here, but it just kind of stays here, and then it gets swept under the rug and nothing happens, and then we just kind of move on like nothing happened. um, so yeah, that touched something personally for me, and I think that Bitcoin is that for me. It solves that problem of corruption, and that is why I think I'm so, I don't know, headstrong and obsessed with increasing adoption, especially here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. For me, WikiLeaks was actually something that really taught me how the world works. And when it exposed some of the atrocities that were happening in the Middle East, and just really learning that quite often our freedoms in countries, I was born in the UK, many of my friends are in the US, but our freedoms are often built upon the back of others' sufferings. And never is that more true as you learn more and more history. And unfortunately, the winners of wars or the winners of even some of the atrocious acts that we're seeing around the world at the moment are often the ones that get to write history. And so also those that control the media get to perpetuate one side of the propaganda. And that is often used in order to commit acts that are, that are not in line with any of our ethics and values. And so WikiLeaks was like the counter to that, and just the alternative media, and giving the opportunity to expose that. And it did almost get shut down. We've all experienced having our bank accounts shut down, just for simply wanting to buy Bitcoin, or or have a transaction. And the more and more you get into the different issues that governments may not want you to solve, but are important issues to you, the more you start to experience financial censorship, and Bitcoin starts to touch your life. I didn't have the same experience that you had, but I lost my father in 2022. Personally, I believe that was accelerated by a vaccine. But it's just all of these different areas touch our lives as well, and that's why Bitcoin is so interesting. Okay, so you got it right away. You understood how it became important from the WikiLeaks after that. What was your first experience with Bitcoin? What did you do in order to join the community?
Well, at first I started. Well, actually, I joined Whalepool first, like a group on Telegram. It was a Bitcoin Maxi group where most of the early adopters were in that group as well, talking. You had Charlie Shrem in there, and even Vinny Lingham and LTC. Charlie Lee would pop in now and then just to shit talk Bitcoin, and then they we'd shut it all down, and then everybody would kind of hardcore maxi against them. What's happening on Bitcoin Twitter now? So that was my first kind of joining the community remotely, and then I started mining in 2018. I got about 20 ASICs and started running them in an extra bedroom here. That was my first interaction with the network itself.
Wow, that's the best way to get started. And so what were the economics like for you running it as a home miner in 2018? Did you is electricity viable there? Did it last for long? What was your experience?
Well, electricity is fairly cheap here. It still is compared to other countries. It's still around 2.4 cents at the moment, so it was pretty low, a lot lower back then. And I had 20 S9s running at the time. But my experience buying the miners was actually pretty odd, and it also revealed things that I didn't like about the industry at the time. It was right after the hard fork. You had Roger Ver, Jihan Wu, like the whole issue of block size wars going on, and we all know who owns Bitmain. And then while I was buying the miners, I think I bought a batch, and then suddenly after I think a couple of days or something, I got a coupon code to get them for, I think it was 50 or 60 or maybe even higher percent off. So I bought another batch, and at the same time they were having issues in Venezuela. Like miners were having issues in Venezuela being able to the whole hyperinflation was happening, and I think miners had trouble getting machines. So we helped a couple of people down there get miners with some of the machines, and then 20 I shipped here. But that revealed to me that the price of the miner wasn't actually closely related to the production cost of the miner. Like it wasn't being sold with a margin; it was just being sold with a kind of a market price. And there were also rumors going around that they were being used for 6 months before they were sold, on the market. So just things like that back then. And that just made clear, the centralization of just the production of miners at the time, and that's my experience. And honestly, like I we kept it live for I think 2 years, but commercial mining is just not. Uh, I find it very boring, to be honest. It's not something I feel very passionate about to do. I'd rather just facilitate miners here, for example.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, the whole industry, it is interesting how it all plays into the geopolitics. Like, as you start talking there, we're talking about, Venezuela suffering hyperinflation, a country that through sanctions has had, the deepest level of either corruption or, interference, political interference, and forces countries into forming new alliances, and just the knock-on effects of these financial sanctions that drive all these unintended consequences, and then just the destruction of people's wealth. We think about inflation as this thing, in America or in Europe, it was like this 10% thing that leads to a few queues of trying to get gas and stuff. But these are countries that suffer, up to, like, I mean, some of it in the extremes, up to 900%. We've been seeing, and that's complete destruction of people's wealth. And then you realize that Bitcoin plays on every side of that. So, in order to give people the ability to mint this global currency, people can mine their own Bitcoin. They can purchase equipment with fiat currency, and it kicks out Bitcoin the other side. That also gives them the ability to, have their own nodes so that they can actually verify their own transactions. But the machines are all made in China by the largest companies in China, like Bitmain. And at that time, Bitmain was involved in all this politics around, trying to fork off Bitcoin and create fake Bitcoin called Bitcoin Cash. And then also there's all the chips. So it's, those are all coming from Taiwan. And then at the time, they were manufactured by like Bitfury and then various other places in Europe and America and China. So it really is a complete geopolitical play when you discover it. So after getting bored of mining, what did you do next? Did you try and create some companies in Bitcoin?
Yeah, so the main problem that I wanted to solve in Suriname was one of the problems I myself was facing, and I kind of, or actually a combination of problems that you face here, and just working with banks, having trouble accepting online payments. Like my first company I started about 21 years ago, when I was 15. Um, it was being able to order products on Amazon, because not many people here had a credit card at the time, and we don't have like a Visa or Mastercard on our debit card, so the amount of people that can actually purchase products online are limited, and then they don't have an address to send it to either. It's pretty expensive to get FedEx or UPS here, so it was online payments was an issue. Banking, it's an issue. Me getting a mortgage, for example, um, we were going from family member to family member, and we just wanted, like I wanted a home with my mom to stay, and we had, through a friend, an old friend of my dad's, got access to a mortgage, but it was 19% interest rate. So that's where you immediately see how hard it is to be able to afford a home if you need to pay 19% interest rates. So I was working 3 jobs at the administrative job, earlier in the day. So I saw that difficulty, and also in just building my companies, getting, um, like for example, a commercial loan, just to be able to cover, or increase liquidity in your company. It's also around 18 to 24%, depending on which bank. So you see the high interest rate, and how that hampers trade and just the growth of your company, and just how difficult it makes it to just to thrive in this economy. And then I saw I had always been following the U.S. stock market ever since I was a kid, and I had an like this foresight for the 2008 financial crisis as well. You could see the centralization and how things are basically being inflated, right, in the capital markets. But you could see that companies raising capital. And I saw Bitcoin as this opportunity to build like a new financial system, right? Build one from scratch, build a capital market that's actually functional, that's actually a free market, that where funds are actually just allocated according to performance, right? If a company performs well, then it should get the funds to grow and to thrive. And people that are not able to, um, to generate returns in that way, or like build a company, they should be able to get some of the profit or the wealth, or distribution of that wealth that's created by that entity. So I was thinking of how do you like kind of Trojan horse Bitcoin into an economy. So figuring out an exchange and getting Bitcoin on there, because the struggle was still like, how do you tie a stock to Bitcoin, especially with the value and the fluctuation of Bitcoin? Like how would the market dynamics of that work? So figuring that out was something I set out to do, and was 100 like full time working on that until about 2022, and then we pivoted and focused on the Bitcoin Real Estate Investment Trust, and shifted focus from jurisdiction to Bermuda just because of the political instability here. Um, so yeah, that's basically. And the Bitcoin Real Estate Investment Trust is the first product. We're building the applications in development right now. So yeah, still chugging along, trying to be, Bitcoin only, and it's been hard, to be honest, to just all throughout the years. Like, how many people say you should have just, if you had just created a shitcoin, you'd probably have 30 million by now, or 100 million by now. Like, for
Yeah.
example, earlier last year, Hedera offered us like $10 million in a grant, for funding, or just to fund a company, and it's non-dilutive. It's a grant, but you have to build on Hedera. So I said no to that because we wanted to be Bitcoin only. You want to have the right investors on board. You want to have investors with the right values that don't force you to build something else, right? We want to build um, something to replace mortgages, something to change the real estate market completely, with Bitcoin at its core. And if you have the wrong investors on board here, you're not going to be able to do it in the way you want to. And that just seemed very important to us. So it's been difficult. It is difficult being Bitcoin only, but um, we're chugging along.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. It is a part of our sector and our industry. But there are some success stories. Like, the capital market story is deep to me because that was my background. I came from investment banking, wanted to give lectures on banking reform, and then got into pivoted my bank into capital markets to fund Bitcoin companies. And one of our we did the whole Bitcoin bond in 2014, and we did a Bitcoin VC fund in 2015. And in 2016, Bitfinex got hacked, and we created a Bitcoin token, which was the first security token in the world, which got Bitfinex out of bankruptcy without having to actually. Because they swapped the debt, for and that was all done on top of Bitcoin. It was the best. The investors that took the equity in exchange for the Bitcoin denominated token, they did incredibly well. And then Bitfinex actually went on to create their own like liquid based security token exchange, and they're doing stuff in El Salvador and stuff like that. So we look forward to continuing seeing where all that goes. And we then had Liquid, which just doesn't quite have the community yet. We look forward to seeing where that goes. But we seem to be hitting a turning point where there are more things you can do on top of Bitcoin. We got the changes that's needed, and it's still an ongoing area to look at. But I think once we can crack, how to construct these different retirement products, these different country bond products, these different ways of supporting mortgages using Bitcoin, I think it's the next era, which makes me believe that we're just at the very beginning. So there's still so much more to go, and look forward to tracking how that all goes for you. But then we get to the subject that really excites me, and that's finding as many passionate people with lots of energy that get the Bitcoin ethos to become the next wave of politicians. While it's all exciting, hearing a bunch of old men in Congress talk about how Bitcoin is a strategic reserve asset. And actually, ironically, the Bitcoins that they're trying to use as strategic reserve assets were confiscated from Russ Ulbricht for creating a website, Silk Road, and also from those very same Bitfinex hack victims, which should actually be returned to those victims. But anyway, I digress on that. But that brings the interesting opportunity for, as governments engage in Bitcoin, this is an opportunity for the global South to be early, flip the global North while all these people are trying to figure out what it means for them. And so, as many people as we can get into Bitcoin politics, which seems very counterintuitive. So tell me, as a Bitcoiner that's passionate about exposing governments through WikiLeaks and removing financial blockades through Bitcoin, why did you want to get into politics?
Honestly, I didn't. I've avoided politics. Actually, I've been much more of a political activist. Actually, openly speaking and getting into trouble here actually for speaking about government corruption and corruption at the central bank. So I wasn't thinking of going into politics actually until Samson came here in November. And we had meetings here with the president, with the central bank, with a lot of influential CEOs, the banking commission, and several financial institutions here. And Samson, at some point during a meeting, he said, you understand everything, everything, how these products work and how you can basically develop your country. You should run. And then he and Ben kept repeating that, and just seeing more and more corruption happening after that. And actually, more corruption was uncovered after Samson submitted his proposal to the central bank. We uncovered that the only reason why Bitcoin isn't legal tender yet is because one of the president's personal advisors and friends and sponsors has been mining Bitcoin here since 2021. So it's kind of like hypocrisy. You're already mining it, privately. You're facilitating one of your friends. So it's nepotism, but you're not paying executive order that they could have passed since November to make Bitcoin recognized as legal tender here. So that kind of pushed me over the edge where I'm already completely tired of corruption in this country. I think most of us here are. And there were also before that people that had were protesting, and they were lobbying for what we call a Saka cabinet. It's an interim government of technocrats, entrepreneurs, people that just come in, have the skills, and basically restructure government and tackle the economic situation that you have right now. So I'd already been approached by political parties and by political activists, and I had discussions here, and there was enough support for me to actually decide to take that step. Because I wouldn't do it, if I didn't have a team around me to actually execute once elected. So it was very important for me to touch base with the private sector, financial sector, and just make sure that the support is there, that people actually want that change. That's how I kind of rolled into it.
Yeah. Well, activism is a great way of getting into it. I think it's getting it in for it to the right reasons. If you want to make a difference in the corruption that you see, if you want to build from the ground up, um, we got this model. President Bukele, created this model where he, in his story, just created his own party, startup. I'm the coolest dictator in the world, and I'm going to be the CEO of El Salvador. Built a massive social media following, and just said, "Hey, look, you just gotta gut this all out. You gotta, yeah, got a lot of criticism for being called a dictator and various other things. But say what you like. He's transformed that country, and there were hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people that were being extorted for 30% of their wealth through threat of their children and family being murdered. Now they can take that 30% and they can invest it in Bitcoin instead. Bitcoin's legal tender. Everyone was able to get their $20 worth of Bitcoin at a price that was very favorable. He told the IMF that there are alternative plans. We haven't seen the Bitcoin bond yet, but the vision is there. Bitcoin City's there. They have volcano power that they can use to mine Bitcoin. And there's a vision, and everyone's excited, and people are flocking to El Salvador. It's getting tourism it never had before. It's got that safety that it didn't have before. And quite frankly, when I visited there, every single person that I spoke to absolutely loved their president, which creates a unification and a mission, of people that are all here to support the country, love their leader, and want to bring everything to that, which is just awesome. And so we've got this cookie cutter model. Can you use activism? Can you build from the ground up? It seems like draining the swamp in America is a very difficult task. There is movements for that. But when you're dealing with a smaller country, um, can we as a community back Maya? I think we should all be involved in. So, Maya, why don't you tell us about your country? The resources, the economy, the population, what it's like to try and get support. Just give us an understanding, because I'm sure most people have never been. So why don't you tell us about Suriname? Am I saying that correctly? That's how bad it is. Suriname.
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty small country. It's in terms of landmass, we're a lot bigger than El Salvador, but it's 93% forested. So only 7%, is residential or commercially developed. So we have 93% Amazon rainforest, where we have an abundance of natural resources. We have gold, we have oil. There's logging, all that, though that has to be done sustainably. But there is an abundance of natural resources, and we also have a lot of hydropower potential as well. We have hydropower capacity, but for example, there's a 450 megawatt to 650 megawatt hydro dam that's currently being lobbied for. That it was the whole plan, the feasibility study, everything, the develop, the design and everything was done by Alcoa for bauxite mining, and it could be done with a much smaller footprint, for Bitcoin mining, for example. And I we want to take it a step further than just making Bitcoin legal tender. I mean, that would be, um, an easy to implement first thing that you do is basically doing that executive order. It's a one pager. It allows Bitcoin to be seen the same way as euro or dollars. We have a small population, 600,000, about a tenth of the size of El Salvador. So, and on a much smaller area, so you can actually educate and create more awareness and adoption. But just using Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, I'm like, I don't think that is, in like Satoshi put it in the Genesis block, you should still have the central bank that has a Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, but you still have the whole infrastructure with the commercial banks. Right? It's supposed to replace what we previously knew as money. It's the payment layer on top of the internet, and we're so underdeveloped here in terms of just financial infrastructure, payment infrastructure. We don't have payment processors. We can't accept Stripe or PayPal payments aren't like that frequently used here. Websites aren't common because it doesn't make sense to have a website because there's more presence on Facebook. You can't really use your website to accept payments, for example. It's quite an issue here. So not just on the payments infrastructure side, even our banking infrastructure is very fractionalized and outdated. The system between the central bank and the commercial banks. We don't have a capital market, so you don't have the interaction between the central bank and the commercial banks where they do open market operations. That has just recently been implemented, and they've been doing a shit job at it at that. So you lack the skills and the capacity to have that even traditional capital market. So we can actually develop from scratch here. And I imagine a country where we're basically an import economy except for our natural resources. Like we don't produce enough. Um, we're just not an economy of scale where you can actually start producing and manufacturing here for the local market and make it feasible. So a lot isn't produced here. And I see an opportunity where you can actually have people earn in sats, actually Bitcoin being money. You earn in sats. Your company is supposed to have its treasury in sats. Like everything is supposed to be denominated in sats. When you go to the supermarket, you'll see the prices in sats. And I see that people will then see, instead of having the Surinamese dollar, and see that lose value in comparison to fiat currencies, 50, 60% in previous years, will have a currency where they can actually see fiat lose value over time in relation to their own currency. And then you don't have this currency where we're still basically a semi former colony of the US or of Europe because we're using foreign currencies as our method of exchange. So I see it as a way to increase our sovereignty and our independence, and a way to actually just get our people on a Bitcoin standard and get them to be able to use hard money, not some fractionalized version of it, but like actually hard money. And the country's strategy would need to be on how to increase, our sovereign wealth fund, because that's how I would structure it. I'd say we have a sovereign wealth fund. Oil royalties come in; those get converted to Bitcoin. We hold it in Bitcoin. We have a strategic reserve that is from the community. That's not just controlled by the central bank. And the strategic reserve would then be complemented by like mining activities. For example, from the hydro dam, you have 450 megawatt in the dry season, 650 megawatt capacity in the rainy season, that can be allocated completely to mining. I see this also as a part of our energy transition strategy. Right, right now we're an economy that's completely dependent on gold mining and fossil fuels. So how are we going to transition away from being dependent on fossil fuels, and transition into more renewables, more sustainable sources that requires massive amounts of energy, like artificial intelligence, like Bitcoin, and capitalize on that and add it to the sovereign wealth fund, add it to the strategic reserve in the middle of that as well. I see no reason why funds from the sovereign wealth fund couldn't be directly distributed to people. Right now, our government consists of 17 ministries. 68,000 people work for government. That's about half of our working population. So right now, our natural resources are flowing through government. They pickpocket what they can, and then the rest flows to salaries of people anyway. So we've calculated that we can actually do universal basic income I know it's a dirty word sometimes, but it wouldn't be levying of taxes to facilitate that. So it would directly be natural resources flowing just straight to the people instead of it being controlled by government. And trimming down government from 17 ministries to seven, privatizing a lot of the state owned companies. So, energy, water, um, we have a state owned gold mine, the state oil owned refinery, our national airline, all companies that are performing badly because of mismanagement, nepotism, corruption. Those could be a source of income initially, where you open it up, on liquid, for example. Just imagine your utility company, having access to a global market of investors, being able to fund a hydro dam, being able to fund a nuclear power plant, and the world having access to that. And instead of just having our country manage it, having global partners, the best in the world in their fields, come here and work on what would be the most innovative strategy I think that anyone has in the region. um, so I see it as part of our transition strategy. I see it as part of diversifying the economy specifically. And I think where we can distinguish ourselves is, in this geopolitical arena. It's not anything new. Countries have been oppressed for decades, for hundreds, for centuries. We all know, especially in this region, the part that other countries, that the West has played in our countries, stimulating dictators, paying for their weapons, stimulating counter government when they thought it was too communist or too socialist, or just interventions from the West, and then transitioning that from that to afterwards IMF, IDB, World Bank, and then basically making our countries debt slaves to the West. I see it as a way to transition away from that, and all of this censorship that is happening, all this warmongering that is happening. If we put into place laws uh, and policies that are different, then can set an example for, like, if we, instead of choosing centralized companies, if we, instead of using, sorry, I can you still hear me? I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, all good. Carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, so if we focus on um, you know freedom, open source, companies that are not as centralized as how our how the current internet is centralized. For example, like over the past decades, Google has grown immensely, and you can just see how that controls how we experience internet globally. Companies like Facebook, social media, and how you experience media, how you experience news, how you experience truth, right, and reality globally, is based on what kind of information you're being fed. So I think here we can set a standard, that supports, for example, open source and freedom technology like Noster, that supports development on Bitcoin, stimulates development on Bitcoin. Having our sovereign wealth fund, you know, investing into Bitcoin only companies that are developing infrastructure, that are building that financial system of the future, that cannot be controlled, that cannot be censored, that cannot be centralized. I think if we properly allocate funds and diversify into technology in that way, that we can set an example for the rest of the world, and hopefully shift the tide of what's currently happening in the rest of the world.
Yeah, this is such an exciting thing, and it's in a world of so much darkness, in a world of where the what I call the proof of weapons network, the fiat currency that is siphoning off and supported by the military industrial complex through lobbyist groups that are quite frankly owning Congress and this is at this is at the center of the free world. We're seeing it in real time. That is exporting through the capitalism, through to socialism, through the Federal Reserve, through to, if they get their way, a central bank direction. And it's always, fear and these boogie monsters of saying that like that when the Federal Reserve is literally creating, a constitutional government. And then you've got Bitcoin, this proof of work network that gets to repurpose natural resources and energy into something that no one can control. And so I want everyone to understand the vision here for this opportunity. Here is a country, I think you said, about 650,000 population, is that correct? With about 40% of the population under...
No, for 40% of the voting population is under 35.
But 40% of the population. So we got this next generation of people coming through. They need a young president that's got energy, that understands technology from the ground up, and just take out the status quo. And these young people, they can stay in their country, they can have this opportunity. And we've got this gold mining industry. We've got this opportunity for really developing out the energy and electricity. We got this opportunity for repurposing, the opportunity and using that hard money to create the next wave of Bitcoin financial products. And if this can be done in one country, I think you're going to inspire me to even probably run for president or prime minister of Isle of Man if we can get this model right. Because this is what the future is, right? Bitcoin was the promise of hope. It was the promise of freedom. It was the promise of being able to earn your own money, being able to spend your own money, and being able to beat inflation, and giving everyone a wealth effect whereby you can construct amazing open source financial products that the whole world can use. And we can just, quite frankly, make government smaller and have this freedom money that gives the world hope. Right. So the old world is driving us to war. And then all the exciting and the peace is happening in this new world of Bitcoin. And we're trying to manage this transition. And whether we have this, this incredibly destructive war or not is dependent upon our current leaders. It's dependent upon stamping out the corruption. It's dependent upon Wikileaks exposing the truth and us listening to the truth. It's dependent upon being able to remove all this financial oppression and financial suppression and these financial blockades. And the next generation are gonna be the ones that are gonna be able to make that different. Hopefully, we can avoid this world war. But after every world war, you get a new monetary order, you get a new monetary renegotiation, and you get a next wave of people that are really focused on peace because they don't want to go back to war again. So hopefully, we can avoid it. But in the meantime, we got to build the place we want, because after war is always the most prosperous times in history. And with the technology that we have today, we've kind of hit a crossroad. We can either do this all closed source, and we can allow all the artificial intelligence to be coded without us understanding what's happening. We can have central bank digital currencies where, the algorithm is not understood and may not be in line with the goals that we want, even if the government create it or the central bank create it. Or we can have people like Maya in charge of her country make a big difference, inspire a next generation of people that want to be a part of their government startup, and just chip away at these things, and open source the whole damn thing, so that other countries can say, well, we want some of that. And that's the hope that we bring. So it's all on your shoulders, Maya. The whole future of the world is dependent upon you becoming the next president. And how can we as Bitcoiners make sure that happens?
I immediately think about Atlas Shrugged. So thanks for that, putting the world on my shoulders. Well, I think it's very important to make myself irrelevant. I think that's the most important thing. I think government needs to be irrelevant. I think it needs to be as decentralized as it can be. I mean, as technology is, right? You can everybody has a phone, but you still need this centralized like president or figurehead to decide for you. And there's so much government overreach in everything we do, and it keeps increasing. Like, how many things can you actually do without asking the government for permission, right? So the goal is to make myself as irrelevant as possible as soon as possible, and bring the decision making and the budgets back to the people, and just decentralize the whole operation. So, how can Bitcoiners support? I'd say any boots on the ground right now help. Any investments into local infrastructure, whether it's you coming down and putting down POSs at merchants, whether you hop onto a solar project and start Bitcoin mining, whatever you can do to have a positive impact and show that Bitcoin is actually, this good thing. Because the media here has, aside from me being very positive about it, been very negative, and not everybody reads the international media. So there's a small community that does follow, the positive things that are being done and said in the Bitcoin community, but it's still very like intangible here for people, and I'm only a one man army. So getting boots on the ground, helping onboard merchants, teaching people how to use these NFC cards to be able to pay with Bitcoin or use a Blink wallet, just increase adoption, show them that it actually works. Come to the conference, November 7 to 9, because we don't have an investment climate here, and everybody's pretty much in survival mode. Our economy's tanked a little bit. So on the fundraising side, we could definitely use some help, especially for the campaign. Even the large parties have a pretty small budget. So in comparison to U.S. elections, we don't need a billion, and our strategy is a lot different than traditional political parties. What they traditionally do is they give away packages, or they pay people like 100 SRD or 1,000 SRD to get on a bus and go to like a party where they have music and give them free food. We want to actually have projects on the ground that change people's lives. So our campaign is focused on actually, working at orphanages to get them to be more sustainable using solar and Bitcoin mining. Like, that is one of our projects, for example. And the same goes for rural villages. Um, Teaching, communities that are having problems with being able to have access to a bank account, or need to stand in line for hours at an ATM that eventually runs out at the end of the day, solving that problem for people by just part of the strategy, being able to support NGOs that don't have other sources of income except for donors, for them being able to have mining as a source of income. Just projects on the ground that actually touch people and tackling this, and a lot more education in the media, because people don't truly grasp this. Just everything that we just talked about, how big this opportunity is, and how it will actually impact their lives. I talk about it on TV, but people don't really, have that. They don't understand or comprehend. So just we need to educate more here. We need to have more education on how this is actually possible. Not many people know what's happening in
Central America, Africa. It just feels like these various regions are the ones where it just takes, people that have that fight the legacy system, and I know that that's no joke. Fighting the legacy system, quite frankly, as you've experienced in your family, these things with this level of corruption is no easy task. It can cost everything. But it feels like we're just at that turning point where this opportunity is here. I think you mentioned that the miners, the government is actually already mining. You found out, or is there? Are you looking for like other companies to come in and build some infrastructure? What needs to happen to build the mining vision and make that happen?
So the government is it's actually pretty controversial because the government, it's not the government itself that's mining, it's one of the government's advisors, and he's mining privately. So we don't know if he's paying taxes, and he's getting a very low rate from the hydro dam while they're increasing prices for like just residential users, um, and it's being subsidized. So subsidies for that need to end. So it's a very controversial topic. So they're mining on that hydro capacity. We need something that's not dependent on government, not dependent on on the hydro dam, for example, like solar, like solar, like run of river hydro projects in some of these villages to get started and get up and running and start showing that it's not just something in the air that we're talking about that you only see on Google, but it's actually something that can actually create wealth and impact people's lives.
Awesome. Well, I hope many people in your country watch this video. I'm sure they've watched many of your other videos. I know I'm completely encapsulated by the vision. I really want you to make this happen. I'd love for this to be something that many other countries can use. And it seems like, the opportunity in South America with resources, with the desire to fight against some of the corruption that is being experienced, and also just the ability to get independence, because we are moving from a world where the economic hitmen at the International Monetary Fund are becoming less and less popular, but China's swooping in with their Belt and Road Initiative loans. And so far, we haven't seen them come with as much regime change. But right around the corner, we're seeing exactly what's happening in Venezuela right now, whether it be corruption from existing leadership to regime change and corruption from those that are actually engaging in supporting military coups. And Wikileaks will reveal everything that we need to know, and even political intervention at the social media level. Elon Musk became an important player in that election. And what does that mean as we move to the future? Well, to me, it's got to be more and more open source, more and more ability to own your own assets, the ability for everyone to have their own property rights as property rights are being violated. And I think the only way we can drain this swamp is using the gift that we were given, and that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin gave us the ability to earn our own money, spend our own money, beat inflation. And that opportunity is open to every single individual, every single company, and every single country. And I think if it can be done at the country level, you can inspire a whole generation of next people that can install hope, and they can rebuild their own countries, and they can transform their own countries. And hopefully that's the next wave of peace that we can bring to the world. So it's one big mission. Where can people follow you and find out more? Where are you most active on social?
Twitter or X or Noster. I'm pretty active in our Bitcoin Suriname Telegram group, so you can find me there if you want to reach out. Any of our social channels.
So Maya for President 2024. Everyone, please make this happen. And thank you so much for sharing what you're up to, and let us know in any way we can help. We need more people like you that are going to make this difference. So thank you very much. I enjoyed the interview.